London's Chapter Road is like any other road you might find anywhere in the world. Silent on most days, with people mostly minding their own business. But there's one small thing, well, actually it's a pretty big thing that sets it apart. On one of the walls, you'll find a large picture painted to commemorate a 2-year-long fight led by, wait for it, South Asian women, a lot of whom were from India. The silent street was once filled with 20,000 people from all across the country fighting in a strike led by these women. They smashed the beliefs of all those who saw this as just a bunch of small, weak women and made a mark not only on the history of this street but Britain's as well for fighting for the rights of workers. Many remember the summer of 1976 to be one of Britain's hottest. This was also the year when work was being carried out in full force at a small photo processing factory in Chapter Road called Grunwick. People sent in their films and the workers at Grunwick developed and printed them. Most of these workers were South Asian women. These women had gone from India to Britain only to find a tough life. They faced problems in getting houses and jobs. The few places where they could find work were these small, low-paying factories. One such factory was Grunwick. It went from door to door handing out leaflets that said, "Come and we will give you a job. We give jobs to everyone." By 1976, Grunwick had hired its highest number of employees ever. Most of the owners and managers were white males. Lower level positions were filled by South Asian women. Their work was to sort and pack all the developed photographs. But it really wasn't easy. The factory was a small and confined space with very little ventilation. The workers had to face humiliation from their managers. These managers sat in glass cabins where they could keep an eye on all the women. The workers had to even seek permission to use the bathroom or the toilet. Forget bonuses. There were no bank holidays or sick leaves. And if they didn't work fast enough, they could get suspended at any time. All this while getting paid just £28 a week, well below the average £44 for women in London at the time. On top of that, they were consistently made to work overtime. A worker recalls an incident that set in motion a large protest. On 20th August at 6 p.m., one of the workers was packing up as her shift ended. It was just then that she was told to stay and work overtime. This worker was Jayaben Desai. Now she might look small, but what she did next was massive. She refused this order.
She turned to the manager and said, "Mr. Manager, what you're running here is not a factory, it is a zoo. And in a zoo, there are many kinds of animals. There are monkeys who dance to your tune. There are also lions who can bite your head off." And she said, "We are the lions, Mr. Manager." And she walked out. And as she was walking out, she told the other workers, he won't treat white workers the way he treats us.
After this incident, Jayaben walked out in protest. In the coming days, she encouraged more and more women to join. In just 3 days, 75 other Grunwick workers were right out there protesting alongside Jayaben. What started then was the 2-year-long Grunwick strike led by women. These women would come to be known as the strikers in saris. For protesting, they were sacked by Grunwick. Sitting outside the factory, holding banners and placards, these women were asking for basic rights. They just wanted better working conditions. For that, they demanded a trade union in the factory, and they wanted those workers who were sacked to get their jobs back. But to make a bigger impact, they needed more people. So they changed their strategy. They went to around 2,000 places to mobilize support. Jayaben and others gave many speeches, many posters were distributed, and finally they got the support of Apex, a trade workers union. This union gave the strikers salaries while they were protesting and provided them with vans that would bring them to the protest sites. In the whole of Britain's history, this was the first time that migrant workers got the support of Britain's trade union. Their strategy worked. In the summer of the next year, on 11th July 1977, the National Day of Action Against Grunwick was organized. 20,000 people showed up to protest or picket. Postal workers stopped their services, so Grunwick couldn't even deliver the photos that they had developed. Neighbors and people from local gurudwaras would provide hot meals for those who were on strike.
"Hey Robbie, where you going? In the middle of the night, I'm going down to London, to the bloody Grunwick site, where a wee small band of immigrants are fighting for their rights. So put your coat on, Jimmy lad, and come and join the fight. Hold the line, hold the line. We'll be there before the dawn to hold the picket line."
These strikers struck a chord with a lot of people across Britain. Miners also joined in the protests. Even the dock workers, who were earlier against immigrant workers, came out to the streets carrying large banners. Student organizations, anti-racism and feminist groups all lent their support.
Hey Susie, are you coming with a seat left in the van? bring the kids round our place. They're safe with my old man. We're going to join our sisters in the march to victory. With union might and women's rights in solidarity.
Hold the line, hold the line. We'll be there before the dawn to hold the picket line. A few newspapers even showed their support by leaving blank spaces, refusing to print the fake narratives given by the Grunwick authorities. This was perhaps the first strike in the UK in which images of women of colour were dominant. In many of these images, we can see tall policemen with huge helmets, and in the middle is the short Jayaben giving them a strong fight.
There's one particular picture of her with a little handbag walking with her hands up, and there's a line of police all around her. So it really conveyed the lopsidedness of this fight, where the full ranks of the state were pitted against these few workers in a factory. And that motivated people, ordinary members, to turn up to even out that imbalance. And so they turned out on the side of the picketers.
As more and more people joined in support of these women, more and more policemen were added to curtail them. And so there was an increase in injuries and arrests. Many women were kicked, punched and dragged by their hair. The police came in large vans and filled them up with protesters. On 7th November 1977, the day of the last major protest, there were more than 200 injuries and more than 100 arrests. In the court cases that followed, there were a lot of false allegations placed upon the protesters. With all the pressure building up, the government appointed a committee to look into the entire situation. It recommended that Grunwick recognize its workers' right to form a union and give the sacked workers their jobs back. But the owners of Grunwick did not accept it. Apex, the trade union that supported the migrant workers, slowly withdrew their support, and the streets were empty again. Only some of the original protesters were left. 4 out of these, including Jayaben, went on a hunger strike. But the union, the government, the factory, no one heard them this time. So on 14th July 1978, after 2 years of protesting and fighting, the strike was called off. Some consider the strike to have failed, but Jayaben tells them that they're wrong.
The reason what we were fighting, we have achieved it. The treatment with the staff has already changed. It's a great victory. The wages was increased after that. Don't you think it's a victory?
It reminds us how important migrant workers are in shaping all the rights that we have at work today. It also reminds us of the strength of solidarity. It's a narrative that dispels the stereotype of South Asian women as passive, as confined to the domestic sphere, and reminds us they weren't just mothers, they weren't just members of their community, they were workers.
In the streets of Britain, these women showed the entire world that they are not people to be messed with. And so these strikers in saris made their mark on that wall and in our minds forever. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. The kinds of videos we want to make are to ask fun and compelling questions, explore weird and intriguing stories, and delve into secret histories. So if that's something you're interested in, this is the channel for you. Don't forget to tell us what you like in the comments.